I was working the closing shift at the video rental store. The store was dead by 9:30 p.m., which was typical for a Wednesday in November. I'd already gone through the mindless task of rewinding all of the returned tapes, restocked the new releases wall, and wiped down the counter twice. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, emitting that electrical buzz that became white noise after hearing it for hours on end. I was updating the pricing stickers in the action section when I heard the door chime. I glanced over my shoulder to spot a man, maybe mid-30s, average height, brown hair, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. Nothing remarkable. He nodded at me, that brief acknowledgement customers give when they don't want to be bothered, and headed towards the back of the store. I finished up my stickers in action before moving down a few rows to horror. When I was about halfway finished, I realized the store closed in 20 minutes, and I still had to count the register. "Excuse me." I looked up, and the man had materialized at the end of the aisle, hands in his pockets. "Yeah, what's up?" "I'm looking for something really scary." He smiled, almost apologetic, as if he felt bad for asking me to do my job. I've seen all the mainstream stuff. Halloween, Friday the 13th, looking for something, I don't know, different, maybe disturbing." I got this question a lot. Horror nerds love testing our knowledge, and I actually liked the challenge. I stood up, thinking about something unique to offer him. "How do you feel about Italian giallo films?" I've only seen Suspirina," he replied, his tone implying some level of feigned shame. "But I really enjoyed it." "No worries. Okay, so you can handle Argento." I walked past him to the foreign subsection, running my fingers along the spines of the VHS cases. "There's this Lucio Fulci film called The New York Ripper from 1982. I pulled the tape out and showed him the lurid cover. "It's brutal, definitely not for everyone. Slasher, the elements, really violent, kind of sleazy, but if you want disturbing, that's your film." He took the tape from me and studied the cover. His fingers were clean, his nails trimmed, his cologne smelled of leather and spice. He definitely looked like the kind of man who took personal grooming seriously. "The New York Ripper," he said aloud. "What's it about?" Serial killer stalking women in New York. The killer does this weird duck voice thing. It's actually kind of unsettling." I was overselling it now, the way I did when I got going about films. "Fair warning, though, it's pretty misogynistic, even for the genre. Fulci wasn't subtle. Sounds perfect." A red-haired woman browsing the comedy section 2 aisles over looked up sharply, her expression somewhere between concerned and judgmental. I gave her an awkward smile. She went back to examining the much lighter-spirited movies with clear disapproval. He either didn't notice or didn't care. "Thanks for the recommendation, ma'am." "No problem. Need anything else?" "No, this is good." I walked him to the counter and scanned his membership card. Michael Garrison, address on the north side. His account was in good standing, though I noticed he had an overdue fee from 2 months ago of $2.50. He paid it without complaint, rented the tape, and purchased a package of Razzles. The red-haired woman left without renting anything, glancing over her shoulder towards the register on her way out. "Thanks." He smiled, opening the package and popping a small handful into his mouth. "I'll see you next week and I'll let you know how it went." He left with 5 minutes to spare before closing. I locked the door behind him, flipped the sign to close, and had just started counting the register when Dave emerged from the back office. He said, leaning against the doorframe. "Most people would have just pointed him to the horror section and called it a day, but you had to give him the full film school experience." Dave was maybe 50, balding, and wore the same company-branded polo every shift. Had managed this location for 6 years and had the tired patience of someone who'd seen it all. He asked for a recommendation. Yeah, and Jenny would have taken him to new releases, handed him Scream, and been done in 30 seconds. You turned it into a conversation. He wasn't criticizing, just observing. "You're way too good at this, like actual customer service, not just transactional bullshit. Corporate would probably give you your own store if you wanted it." "I'm good, thanks." "Smart man. More money, more headaches." He grabbed his keys from the hook. "All right, I'm out. Lock up?" "Yeah, I got it." Dave disappeared through the back door and locked it behind him. I heard his car start up and pull away. I finished counting at the register and signed off on the paperwork. The store felt bigger when it was empty, all those aisles of movies staring back at me. I hit the lights, section by section, then headed to the break room to grab my jacket. The break room was cramped, A table with 4 mismatched chairs, a mini fridge that hummed too loud, and a counter with a coffee maker that hadn't been cleaned in weeks. Someone had left a newspaper spread open on the table. I reached for my jacket on the back of the chair, and the headlight caught my eye. Police hunt suspect in 4th sex worker murder. There was a grainy black and white photo of a woman, maybe mid-20s, smiling at the camera. Below it were smaller photos of 3 other women. The article detailed location, dates, and the phrase, "Patterns suggest a serial killer," in bold. I skimmed it while shrugging on my jacket. All the victims were of the north side, found in alleys or abandoned buildings. Police were urging sex workers to travel in pairs, to be vigilant. There was a hotline number. I felt that distant sympathy you feel reading about tragedies that don't touch your life directly. Awful, but removed. I wasn't the target demographically. I folded the paper, closed, and headed out. November air bit at my face while I stepped into the parking lot, my breath clearly visible in front of me. There were only 2 cars left, mine and what I assumed was a late customer's, though the store was definitely empty. On second thought, probably someone who just parked to go to the bar down the street. I unlocked the door of my car, a 1991 Nissan 180 SX, and slid into the driver's seat. The interior was cold with that bone-deep chill that seeps into the vinyl. I put the key into the ignition and turned it. Nothing. Not even the struggle grind I'd gotten that morning. Just the clicking of a completely dead battery. Shit. I tried again. Same result. I slumped back in the seat, watching my breath fog up the windshield. I sat there for a minute, weighing my options. I could call a tow truck, but that would take forever and cost money I didn't have. I could call my roommate, Laura, but she worked nights at the hospital and wouldn't be home until morning. I got out, locked the car, and headed back inside. The store felt emptier the second time. I went behind the counter and picked up the old cordless duophone off the receiver and dialed Dave's home number from the contact sheet taped to the wall. It rang 4 times before his answering machine picked up, subjecting me to his awful, generic robot voice. Then finally the beep. "Hey, Dave, it's me. Don't worry if you see my car in the lot tomorrow morning. The battery's completely dead. I'm gonna walk home. It's not far. I'll deal with it before my shift tomorrow. See you then." I hung up and then stood there for a moment in the fluorescent silence. The walk home was maybe 30 minutes, 45 if I took my time. I'd done it before when the weather was nice. It was cold tonight, but not unbearable. Made sure the door was secure and started walking. The street was quiet, since most of the shops on the block closed by 8, and the ones that stayed open later, like the bar and the pizza place, were a few streets over. My footsteps echoed on the pavement in the silence, that hollow sound that makes you aware of how alone you are. First, I passed the closed diner, the darkened dry cleaner, and the insurance office with its Venetian blinds pulled shut. Then I approached the electronics store, Patterson, which always left its display window running overnight. A dozen TV screens glowed in the darkness, all of them usually turned to the same channel. I slowed down, drawn in by the light and movement, and approached the window. The news was on. A female reporter, Alice Murphy. If I recall correctly, she was standing outside a suburban home, the banner at the bottom reading, "Breaking, 2 more children missing." I could hear the faint audio through the glass. "Bringing the total of 5 children reported missing in the past 3 months across neighboring cities. Police say there's no evidence yet linking the disappearances, but parents are urged to keep a close eye on their children and report any suspicious activity." The news report cut to footage of a search party, showing a handful of people in volunteers' vests walking through the woods, probably calling out names. I watched for another moment, feeling a general unease settle over me. The world felt dangerous tonight, full of predators and victims. I thought about the woman in the newspaper, about these missing kids, about all the violence happening just outside the safe bubble most of us lived in. The news reporter ended and cut to a commercial for some 8-minute workout VHS collection, and I continued walking. My route took me through a mix of commercial and residential blocks. The streetlights were inconsistent. Some were bright, some were burnt out, creating eerie pools of shadow I had to pass through. It had been a while since I'd walked home this late, and I'd forgotten how different familiar streets felt in the dark. I was about 15 minutes from my home when I first felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. The psychic staring effect. I felt I was being watched. I turned around, but the street behind me was empty. There was nothing. other than a parked car under a streetlight, the closed storefronts, and a stray cat darting between trash cans. As I pressed onward, the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got stronger. I thought I heard footsteps echoing behind me, but each time I glanced over my shoulder, there was nothing other than the empty sidewalk stretching back towards the commercial district. I told myself I was being paranoid to having reading an article about a serial killer and hearing a news reporting about kidnappings. It was as if my brain was looking for threats that weren't there, but I just couldn't shake it. I was in a residential area now, houses with porch lights on, cars and driveways. It felt safer, and perhaps even normal. I recognized the neighborhood. I was maybe 5 minutes from home. Then I heard the footsteps again, and this time it was definite. It was the distant scuff of shoes on concrete, like someone was trying to match my pace but messed up. I stopped walking, and the footsteps stopped. I turned around and scanned the street. There were parked cars, trees, shadows, and about half a block behind me, a figure. I couldn't make out the details, just the shape, a person. They were just standing there, below a broken streetlight, partially obscured by the darkness. We both stood still, frozen in this weird tableau, as if one of us was waiting for the other to do something. My mind was racing. Should I say something? Call out and ask if they needed help? Run? A porch light came on in one of the houses off to the right, pretty much halfway between us, and a dog started barking. I looked over to the house to see an older man come out with a trash bag and put it in his bin on the curb. I looked back, and the figure was gone. I told myself it was just someone else walking home, maybe someone who stopped because I did. Maybe I was the one who freaked them out. I must have even starting to believe it, but my hands were still shaking. I walked the rest of the way home fairly quickly. I kept looking back, expecting to see that figure again, but the street stayed empty. By the time I reached my block, I'd almost convinced myself I imagined the whole thing. My home was a small, 2-bedroom rental, with white siding that needed repainting, a chain-link fence around a small yard that was more dirt than grass, and it was parallel to a Chinese restaurant, the Golden Wok. Our landlord, Mr. Sang, was an agreeable enough man. Every year he would give us Christmas cards with some candied fruit and a 40% off coupon for the restaurant. He meant well, in his own way. The porch light was on. Laura must have left it on before her shift, and I've never been so relieved to see it. I hurried up the steps to the porch, fumbled with my keys, and got the door open. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment. I was inside, safe, and I felt my heartbeat finally started to slow. The apartment was dark, except for the porch light glow coming in from the front window. I turned on the living room lamp, and the familiar space materialized around me. Our thrifted couch, the television on its somewhat rickety entertainment center, 2 of Laura's nursing textbooks stacked on the coffee table, and my fleecy jacket slung on the armchair from yesterday. Everything was normal. I dropped my keys in the orange ceramic bowl on the console table by the door and kicked off my shoes, tucking them underneath the same table. My stomach growled, and I realized I hadn't eaten anything since my break at 5 p.m. I headed to the kitchen and turned on the light. The refrigerator's internal light hummed to life when I opened the door, illuminating the sustenance inside. On the middle shelf sat the lasagna from 2 nights ago. Laura's cooking. Still half a pan left. I cut a square, dropped it onto a plate, and stuck it in the microwave. Its hum filled the kitchen, and I watched as the plate rotated under the yellow light and the cheese started to bubble. I ate standing at the counter, not bothering to sit at the table. The lasagna was excellent, as always. Laura made it with too much ricotta, just the way I liked it. I could feel the tension from the walk home starting to drain away with each bite. The warmth of the food, the familiar kitchen that was home to many laughs, and the security of our apartment brought me peace. I rinsed the plate and left it in the sink to become tomorrow's problem. Laura would give me shit about it in the morning, but I was too tired to care. I was in desperate need of a warm shower and the comfort of my sheets. I had to be up early to deal with my car situation before tomorrow's shift. I headed down the hallway to the bathroom, already pulling my shirt over my head. The bathroom was small, perpetually humid, and had tiles that had been white once, but were now more of a dingy cream. I turned the shower on and waited for the water to heat up. Once steam started to fill the small room, I stepped under the spray and let it wash away the cold, the stress, and the paranoia of the walk home. The water pressure was shit, but it was hot, and that was enough. I stood there, longer than I needed to, letting the warmth sink into my muscles. As a result, the bathroom looked like a sauna by the time I stepped out of the shower. I wiped the mirror and looked at my reflection, observing how exhausted I truly was. I brushed my teeth and changed into a clean white t-shirt and gray sweatpants I'd placed in the bathroom this morning, anticipating my after-work shower. As I made my way to my bedroom, I stopped dead in my tracks when I felt something peculiar. Cold air that was coming from a breeze that had no business being there. The warmth of the shower was evaporating off of my skin, replaced by a chill that raised goosebumps down my arm. The door to my bedroom was ajar, which was not out of the ordinary, as I always left it open when I wasn't in there sleeping. But something was wrong. I could feel the air moving, cold and insistent. I pushed the door open and felt around the nightstand for the lamp's light switch. The bedroom window was open. The curtains were moving in the breeze, and I could hear the sounds of the night outside. I stood there, staring at it for a moment. I walked over to it slowly, the cold air washing over me. The window was pushed up maybe 6 inches, enough for the November chill to fill the room. When did I... And then I remember. Last night, or maybe the night before, I woke up too hot and my bedroom felt stuffy and airless, the way it usually did when the heat kicked on. I must have stumbled over to the window, half asleep, and pushed it open to let the cool air in. I'd obviously forgot to close it afterwards. I was in a rush this morning. The alternative, that somebody had opened it, that somebody had been in my house, was too absurd to consider. The front door had been locked when I got home. Laura had left the porch light on, and everything was normal inside. I pulled the window shut and felt the resistance as it stuck slightly in the frame as usual. The sound of the wind immediately muted, and the curtains remained still. I flipped the latch closed, locking the window shut. The room already felt warmer. I got into bed, turned off the lamp, and pulled the covers up. The room went dark. Just the ambient light from the street flickering through the curtains. I could hear the house settling, the old pipes ticking, the furnace humming to life in the basement. I closed my eyes, and sleep came quickly, that heavy pull of exhaustion dragging me under. I don't know how long I was out, but something woke me. A sound. I lie there in the dark, eyes open, listening. The house was full of sounds at night, and I had lived there long enough to know them all. The sound had come from the hallway. At first, I thought it was the floorboard settling, but then I heard it again. It wasn't a random creak. It was footsteps, slow and deliberate. So somebody walking carefully, trying to be quiet, followed by the jingling of keys. Laura, she must have just gotten home. I felt the tension in my chest start to relax, and I continued to listen to her footsteps, visualizing her path through the house. But something felt wrong. The footsteps were strange, even hesitant, like someone unfamiliar with the layout, feeling their way through the dark. Laura knew this house. She could navigate it blind. She wouldn't be moving like that, pausing, stopping, carefully testing each step. My mouth went dry. That wasn't Laura. I sat up, slowly, trying to not make my bed creak. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness enough to make out the shapes of my dresser, the window, and the doorway into the hall. I slid out of bed, my bare feet touching the cold wood floor. I moved towards the doorway, each step careful and quiet, opened the door, and stepped out into the hallway. It was darker than my room, and I could barely see anything, but as I approached the living room, I heard breathing. It wasn't mine. It was slow, steady, and patient. Laura? My voice came out as a whisper. No response. Laura, is that you? Nothing. I took another step into the living room, squinting into the darkness, as fear took hold and told me not to turn on the lights. My eyes were adjusting more now, and I could make out the shapes of our furniture, the couch, the TV stand, the armchair, and something else. Something that didn't belong. It was in the corner near the window, a darker shadow amongst shadows. I stared at it, frozen, trying to will my eyes to adjust faster to make sense of what I was seeing. Outside, I could hear the sound of an approaching car driving down the street. As it approached our apartment, its headlights gleamed through the window and briefly illuminated the corner of the living room. It was only a flash. The outline of shoulders, a head, an arm raised, holding something that caught the light, something large and metallic. It was a man, standing in the corner, holding a knife. Oh my God. He lunged. I threw myself backwards and hit the wall hard. He was fast, faster than I expected. The knife caught the light of the porch light from the window as it slashed through the space where I'd been standing. I scrambled towards the kitchen, driven by pure panic. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps heavy. My hand found the door frame, and I used it to pivot into the kitchen, and I felt the tile under my feet. I felt around for the stupid fucking light switch, but there was no time. My hands went to the counter, and I felt the coffee pot. I grabbed it and yanked it as hard as I could, unplugging it from the wall outlet, and hurled it at the intruder. It hit him somewhere, maybe his shoulder, and he grunted and stumbled slightly, but kept coming. I moved along to the counter for something else and found the dish rack and hurled that too, as plates shattered on the floor between us. Next was the toaster, and at that point I realized I had reached for the back door and wouldn't be able to unlock it and get outside in time. Turned around to find his silhouette blocking my path, and he lunged at me again. I ducked and slammed him into the back door with my elbow as he passed me, and then ran into the dining room. He came around the corner with the knife raised again. I got on the far side of the dinner table, gripped the edge, and flipped it. The table hurled sideways and crashed towards him, legs up. He had to jump back towards the kitchen to avoid it, and I used that moment to run back towards my bedroom. If I could get in and barricade the door, I could buy myself time to get out through the window. As I ran back towards the hallway, pain exploded across my forearm, and I trembled into the wall. He'd caught me, and his knife found my skin. I felt a hot rush before the pain finally registered, a slash on my right arm from my elbow to my wrist. I kept trying to move towards the bedroom, but he was right behind me. I could hear his breathing, ragged and excited. His hands grabbed my shirt and yanked me backwards. I spun and started swinging my arms, eventually connecting with something, maybe his face or his jaw. His grip loosened slightly, but now he stood between me and my bedroom. I tried to run towards the living room, and this time, the knife caught my back. A burning slash across my left shoulder blade. I felt my shirt tear, and I could feel the blood soaking the fabric. I screamed and crashed into the armchair. He grabbed me by the back of my neck and hurled me backwards, slamming into the wall. I felt the back of my head crack the drywall, and then felt his hand slip across my throat and start to squeeze. The knife was coming up. I could see it in the dim light gleaming as he raised it up. I grabbed his wrist with both hands, my arm shaking with effort to keep the knife away. He was stronger than me. The blade got closer, his breath hot in my face, coming in excited gasps. I could see him now. He was close enough that his features started to come through, even in the darkness, maybe mid-30s, dark hair, dark jacket, and I knew him. A flashback to my closing shift at the video store, the New York Ripper. Michael Garrison. You! I gasped. His lips pulled back into that same smile, and I recognized it instantly. The knife pushed closer, my arms screaming in their efforts to keep it at bay. You gave me exactly what I wanted, he whispered. His voice was calm and conversational, like we were just still discussing movies. The perfect recommendation. The knife was an inch from my chest, and my arms were giving out. I couldn't hold him back much longer. I couldn't help but think, this was how I died. The gunshots were deafening in the enclosed space. Michael's body jerked, his grip on my throat relaxed, and the knife clattered to the floor. He took a step back, his face an expression of shock and confusion, released his grip on my throat, and slumped to the floor hard. I began coughing uncontrollably, desperately trying to find air to breathe. I looked up to the light coming from across the room. Laura stood in front of the doorway in her work scrubs, her purse on her shoulder, both hands holding her late grandfather's revolver, the one she had always kept nearby for personal protection. I never thought I'd ever have to see her use it. I could see the smoke curling from the gun barrel, and her hands were shaking, the gun wavering in her grip. Oh my God, she whispered. Oh my God, I killed him. I slid down from the wall as my legs gave out and collapsed onto the floor. My arm was on fire, my back was screaming in pain, and I could feel the blood soaking through my shirt, warm and sticky on my skin. Michael's body lay motionless on the floor between Laura and I, and in the illumination from the open door, I could see a pool of blood from underneath him and start to spread outwards. Laura closed the door, turned on the overhead light, crossed the room, and knelt down, pressing her fingers to his neck. He's dead. You saved my life, I breathed, almost in disbelief. Are you okay? Her voice sounded distant, almost mechanical. Are you hurt? He got me a couple of times, but I think I'm okay. She stepped carefully around the body, keeping the gun pointed at it, even though he clearly wasn't moving. She crouched down next to me, her free hand touching my face, my shoulder checking for injuries. We need to call the police, she said. Neither of us moved for a moment. We just sat there, staring at the body on the floor. Laura went to the kitchen and picked up the phone from the wall and dialed 911. Her voice was shaky as she spoke to the operator. There's been a break-in. I shot someone. My roommate is hurt. Please send the police and an ambulance. She gave our address and answered questions, but I couldn't focus on the words. I just kept staring at Michael Garrison's body and the blood beneath him, the customer who'd asked for a movie recommendation, the man who'd followed me home. My mind started to race. Did he come in through the window I'd left open? Was he in the house the whole time? Did I even leave that window open? Or did he get it open? Or did he break through the front door while I slept? I'd never know. Laura hung up. They're coming. 5 minutes. We waited in silence. Laura kept the gun pointed at the body, just in case, but he didn't move. He didn't even twitch. The sirens started maybe 3 minutes later, first far away, then getting closer and louder. We saw the red and blue lights flashing through the front window, painting the living room in strobing colors. Laura and I stood up and approached the door as we heard heavy footsteps on the porch. Police, anyone inside? We're here, Laura called out. I have a gun. I'm putting it down. She carefully placed a revolver on the console table and opened the door, both of us taking several steps back with our hands raised as 2 police officers stepped inside, armed with a gun and a flashlight each. I'm the one who called, Laura said, hands still up. I shot the intruder. He attacked my roommate. One of the officers swept his flashlight across the room, the beam landing on me. Sir, are you injured? Yes. He slashed me with a knife. Twice. My back is worse than my arm, though. The second officer stepped outside and radioed for an ambulance. The first was scanning the room with a flashlight. Where's the suspect? You said you shot someone? He's right. Laura turned, pointing to where Michael's body had been. The floor. The floor was empty, except for the dark pool of blood, gleaming in the flashlight beam. Michael's body was gone. He was right there, Laura said. Her voice climbed with panic. He was right fucking there. He wasn't moving. He was... The second officer returned as the first officer moved his flashlight across the floor, and the beam caught something. Leading away from the pool of blood were bloody footprints, going towards the kitchen. Oh my God, I whispered. The back door. Stay here. The second officer barked at us as they moved towards the kitchen, guns and flashlights raised. A moment later, from the kitchen, he shouted, Back door's open. We got a blood trail. As if on cue, more sirens appeared in the distance and grew louder as they approached. The first officer returned to the living room, talking into his radio. Suspect fled on foot, wounded, possibly armed. White male, 30s, dark clothing, significant blood loss, set up a perimeter upon arrival. Everything started to blur and fade out. I could feel myself swaying on my feet for a moment, then I felt myself hit the floor with a thud. When I came to, I was being placed into the back of the ambulance. The EMT said I probably fainted from the stress, as the blood loss was significant, but not life-threatening. While my wounds were being treated and a police officer took my statement and asked questions, my eyes didn't leave the front door of our apartment. I was in disbelief of everything that had occurred and was so zoned out that I only vaguely remember hearing, area cordon off, and from the knife block in your kitchen, and conduct a full sweep of the neighborhood. They kept me in the hospital for 2 days, mostly for observation for psychological concerns, as the wounds weren't as bad as they felt. The one on my back needed 12 stitches, the one on my arm only needed 6, and I didn't suffer a concussion. There was no permanent damage, though the doctor warned I would be sore for a while. The police hadn't found Michael Garrison, though their search continued. They searched his apartment, the lease was in his name, and the rent was paid through the ends of the month. They found newspapers with articles circled, some stories about the sex workers murdered, and some about missing children. Neither were connected to him, but he'd been following them closely for some reason. There were maps of the city with some routes marked, and one of them went past the video store I worked at, and one past my house. The detective assigned The detective assigned to the case said he had alerts out at every hospital and every clinic. "Someone with 3 gunshot wounds can just disappear," he told me. "We'll find them." They hadn't. Laura stayed with me at the hospital, and she barely slept. Dave had my Nissan's battery replaced and parked it outside my apartment and brought the keys by the hospital. When they discharged me on the second day, Laura insisted on driving me home even though she was supposed to visit her parents that weekend. I should stay," she said for the 10th time as we pulled up to the house. "I shouldn't leave you alone." "Your parents are expecting you," I said, "and the police are watching the house. I'll be fine. Just go. If anything feels off, I'll call you. I promise." She didn't look convinced, but she helped me inside. Mr. Sang caught us on our way in and gave us 2 large containers of miso soup. In his thick accent, he told us he heard the commotion, the gunshots, and later heard the full story from the police. Said he was glad we were okay, and so on. He shuffled back into the restaurant as Laura double-checked to make sure that I had my pain medication and the phone number for the officer posted outside. "Lock everything," she said. "Windows, doors, everything." "I will." She left reluctantly, looking back twice before getting in her car. I locked the front door behind her and set the chain. The house was quiet, different than it had been before. The blood was gone. Some crime scene cleaning service had come while we were at the hospital, but I could still see where it had been, a faint discoloration of the wood grain. The dining table was replaced upright, but in the wrong position, though I hadn't had the energy to deal with it. It was only the early afternoon. There was a bright daylight streaming through the window, and the apartment started to feel warm and inviting. I decided I wanted to curl up on the couch and read a book. As I picked up my book from the end table near the armchair and went to lower myself onto the couch, something caught my eye in the distance, across the apartment. I stopped dead in my tracks and stared in the direction of this kitchen. There was something on the counter, something I didn't recognize, something that didn't belong. It was an item that the cleaning crew misplaced. It was something that had no place in our apartment. I walked over to it, feeling that cold dread settled into my stomach. A VHS tape. The case was black plastic, worn at the edges. I knew what it was before I even read the label. The New York Ripper. My hands were numb as I picked it up. It was lighter than it should have been. I opened the case. There was no tape inside. Just a piece of paper folded once. I unfolded it with shaking hands. It was 3 words inscrawled, yet perfectly legible handwriting. "I'll be watching." I looked to the back door in the kitchen, and to the window in my bedroom, the window in Laura's bedroom, and the front door. Everything had been shut and locked, secure and safe, yet he'd been here again. He came back. He was watching. He was always going to be watching, and I'll never be safe again.